Well done on making it this far. We've now got through the 2 quizzes. So for anybody who's enrolled in the planning unit, KGA 512, we're on to the next assessment, which breaks down the planner's report. So if you're in KGG 507, I emailed you a couple of days to get a go, just to check in with you and make sure that you're okay with having a small breather. We all come back together next week for either the actual field trip, if you want to meet me out on site at Geilston Bay, or you do the online virtual field trip. So that's relevant to everybody, because from now on, we're working on Geilston Bay, whether you're doing both assignments, if you're a planner, the planning report exercises and the rezoning application, or if you're in the surveying unit, you are just doing the rezoning application, and that's 70% of your mark. So checking in with the surveyors, just in case anybody was stressed about that assignment, because it is 70%, and maybe you have other things due. Anyway, I've not heard from anybody, so please get in contact if you want to know sooner rather than later what that's all about. I have opened up week 10, which is the start of the rezoning application. So actually you can have at it really if you're ready for it. So I will share my screen. Let's start with the web page. Okay, so this is a bit disconcerting because the controls just sort of pop up randomly on my screen, and I'm not entirely sure what you can see, but let me know if you can't see Milo. All right, I'll make it a little bit bigger because it's only at 90%. So I did finish marking quiz 2 today. So you should all have that assessment back. The marks were massively spread. A couple of people just completely nailing it, and a couple of people not, and then a whole lot of in between. So I thought before we start talking about Geilston Bay, I'd just quickly go through quiz 2 so that everything that I do is now up on the web page. So as soon as I finished marking the quizzes, I went through and updated web pages 7, 8, 9 and 10. So hopefully they're all up to date now. So please let me know if you can't see this okay. As I was going through and marking the quizzes, I took screenshots of the ones where people were making mistakes. A bunch of people, well, one person got all of the multiple choice true false right. Most people made a few mistakes. So wherever there were mistakes made, I just copied and pasted so that I can quickly flash them up here. Just unmute or stick your hand up or say something in the chat if you want me to explain. So quite a few people did make a mistake here. This was false. So the zone names are all the same. The reason for bringing in a consistent Tasmanian planning scheme was actually to get rid of the hodgepodge in zoning between the 29 different local government areas, and the zones are all the same. Some of the zones don't apply, like earlier in semester we looked at Central Highlands and there is no inner residential because it doesn't apply, but they actually all have the same name. Question 2 was a bit tricky. So a few people got that wrong. Public notification means either a notice in the paper or a sign at the front of property. It actually has to be both. So one of the principles of natural justice is that everybody gets fair warning. So if you don't read the paper or you're not particularly tech savvy, but maybe you live nearby, you'd be relying on the sign at the front of the property. So actually planners need to do a bunch of things to let people know. COVID posed an interesting challenge there, but anyway, they seem to have adapted. Question 4, yeah, a few people got this one wrong. Sorry, I'll stop saying that because that's why they're here. And some of these are a little bit trickier. So some of the questions everybody got right, but I did throw in a few harder questions. So you did need to read the lecture material. I've done the lecture to know how to answer this. You have to choose a use class. So the appropriate answer here was if you're going through a development application, you have to use the class that seems best to fit, even if it's not really fitting all that well. You can't split it. You can't create one. There were only 3 options. The top one's the right one. Yeah, the answer was false in the case of question 6. I think most people got that right. And this was important for the written answers too. Not everybody realised that there were heritage overlays in the case of Lambert Avenue. But basically, anything to do with heritage, council want to have a look at it. There's no acceptable solution. Hobart Airport falls under Commonwealth planning controls. So this one was a bit tricky because it harked back to material from quite early on in semester and some examples. So well done for people who did get that right, because you had to know that all airport land is Commonwealth land. And once it's Commonwealth land, it comes under the Matters of National Environmental Significance, EPBC controls, and it's out of the hands of council. Question 5 was also a bit tricky because lots of people chose beekeeping. Beekeeping's actually an exemption, not a no permit required. They're different. I know this is technical. I know this is planning being pedantic, but the correct response was residential living in a residential zone. You don't need to apply for a permit to occupy a house in an area where there are houses. So this is no permit required. Yeah. This one, if we had a bit more time, I would look it up. A couple of people emailed me about this. The answer was true. This was a little bit tricky because I think actually since this question was put in the question bank, some of the vegetation in this little biodiversity protection area has been cleared. It's now very modest and not really apparent why it has an overlay. But anyway, it has an overlay, so it wouldn't be unreasonable to ask that you might actually need to get somebody out there to assess the values. And maybe when you went on site, it would become obvious why this code applies, but you couldn't really tell from the list. But well done, because most of you actually did get that right. Again, question 11, you needed to delve into the planning scheme. Most people did get this. You actually, yeah, the answer was false. She couldn't do it. The lots are too small. All right, here's the guts of it. So thank you to the people who said I could use their examples here today. A couple of you, so a handful of you just wrote amazing responses, given that you had no time to prep for this. So I kind of wish that I could have allocated more than a couple of marks, but anyway, there you go. So you needed to figure out that the important things were that it was a landslide hazard area and a heritage precinct, and you needed to know that once you've got heritage, that overrides the provisions in the general residential zone. So that's where a few people tripped up, is that you went into the general residential zone and you did a good job of looking things up, and you didn't realise that because of the precinct, there were a different set of controls that applied because there was a conflict. Some people mentioned that there was a landslide hazard, but didn't sort of point out why it wasn't really an issue. So again, thanks to the person for this wording with regard to the landslide code. If you looked under E 3.4 of Hobart Interim Planning Scheme, you could see that because it was a low landslide hazard area, the use, or the development rather, was exempt. But heritage was important here, and this was a reason for setting this. And so when you go into the heritage code, then you could see that you did actually need planning permission. So you needed to advise the owners of 12 Lambert Avenue that they did need planning permission because they wanted to build a shed that was 12 metres squared, and anything that exceeded 9 needed permission. Some people said that they would advise the client to make their shed smaller. Yeah, okay, but they wanted to build a 12 metre squared shed. So you'd need to say that, and given that you actually want a bigger shed, you would need planning permission, not just leave it at, they need, a couple of people said they need to make their shed smaller. They don't need to make the shed smaller, they just need to get a planning permit. It shouldn't be a big deal, but you just need to go through the process. So yeah, so it's a heritage precinct. You needed to find E13 8.2 under the development standards for a heritage precinct. So yeah, well done to people who pointed all of this out. This was a really amazing example. I don't know how you got all of this down in the time available. Just a perfect response. So terribly impressed. Yeah, you identified the zone, you identified the overlays, you advised the permit required, laid out why it was required. So this is a succinct answer, and what I showed you above is all of the bits of the scheme that lead you there. 312. Running out of time, but does anybody want to ask anything about this? Most of you had a pretty good go at it. Maybe not as sparkling as this answer, but got enough to get a 1.5 at least. Okay, couple of examples of the reps for 22 Waterloo Crescent. Again, like this is actually a substantial part of your mark. So thank you to those who put a lot of work in, and I did give a few people 4 marks for this section because, wow. So most people objected, some people supported. This was an example of a good objection. They wrote to the general manager. Not that many people got that. The letters actually go to the GM. Quite a few people didn't put the planning reference in. It's good practice to do it. It just helps the planner figure out exactly what you're talking about. A few people didn't take a perspective or use their own property in Bellerive, which didn't really make a lot of sense. Why would you object unless you lived in the area or you had heritage, you're part of a community group or heritage group? So it wasn't specifically listed in the marks, and I was pretty lenient, but it just didn't make a lot of sense if you weren't a neighbour, you didn't clearly say who you were. Yeah, this was a really good example. Here's the description of what they want to do. Quite a few people missed that. Here's a really clear statement: I object. And then here's why. Here's a bit of background. A few people did a great example of putting in a bit of extra information. It wasn't required, but made me very happy. And then set out the reasons for their objection. And it could just be one reason. Quite a few people went through basically all of the discretions that Liz listed. It didn't really matter so long as your argument was nice and clear. Another thing that you didn't really lose marks on, but I think it's probably important to point out, is that a few people's, use really strong language, and that's fine. It's your opinion. You can say it how you want, but I guess from a professional perspective, you're putting your shoes in the roles, starting to learn to be a professional planner. Concluding sentences like this one were better. You know, thanks for the opportunity to comment. I hope you take my concerns into account. You know, I'd really like to see this proposal amended, something along those lines, rather than words like this is grossly inappropriate. It's okay in a representation, but it just didn't convey to me that you really got the vibe of what this was about. So if you maybe didn't get quite the marks that you were hoping for, some of it was that, like the real polish of the high distinctions did this. This is an example of a good support letter. A few of you wrote support letters. I think that was probably a good idea, given that Ben Ikin showed that actually the extension was done really well. You could hardly see it from the street, and they did end up addressing concerns about the discretions by putting conditions on the permit. So yeah, and again, this one did a really good example of saying, I live nearby, I support it, I've got a couple of concerns about setbacks and heights, but you know, on the whole, I think it's okay. Yeah, I would like these looked at. I support it, but I think it should be approved, but with some conditions. Fantastic. Okay, 317. That's a lot of talking from me, but given that I've just finished all these quizzes and they're super fresh in my head, and this is where you're at, and we're in that transition phase between the quiz and the next assessment, I wanted to throw this in front of you. So before we move on, are there questions about any of this? That's all in the web page if you want to go back to any of that. Okay, so I finished the quizzes in enough time to get working on updating the web pages, which I would have liked to have done before today, but I just haven't had time. So week 7, 8, 9 and 10 all got a look and a refresh today. So just to be maybe, okay, I should be able to see this here. Okay, this is why I put everything in the web page, because it makes it easy to open. So as I said in the video that I made about this, we decided to change tack and not get you to actually write the planner's report, partly because some of you have the planner's report if you did EIA last year. It's not fair for some of you to have it and essentially be able to crib from that, and some of you not, and all be judged in the same cohort. But in thinking around that little challenge, we realised we could probably do better than that. And I think having just marked quiz 2 and seen that a few people didn't really understand the nature of what we were asking you to do, but because they could copy and paste, it did score okay. But I really wasn't convinced that you understood what was going on. This is a bit more of a detailed look into the structure and purpose of the reports that hopefully will give you a bit more context and a bit more understanding, and give you an opportunity to have an opinion rather than just sort of follow a template. So I have put this in front of a couple of people just as a bit of a tester. The response was section 2 looked a bit scary. Yeah, it is quite a bit of work. And so I think one of the important things to get out of today is that you will need a bit of time to sit down and do section 2. That's where a fair bit of the work is for this report. It is 40% of your final mark. I did consider taking some of the reps out, but I think this is a good process for you to go through, and it's reflective of what actually happened in real life where there were 34 reps. So just a heads up, so we're at the 14th of April. You've got a few weeks to do this, but you will need to start thinking about this now, or you will hit a real wall if you try to do it all in one go close to the deadline. So yeah, it's due at the end of the month. If it's better for this to be due on Sunday rather than Friday, totally fine by me. I know some of you, that looking after kids and working, and this is all a massive juggle. Just let me know. I just need to be really clear with everybody so that the deadlines are the same everywhere. So this is what we need to get our heads around this week. Yep, go. Question? No. Okay, for 10 marks, 5 parts, 2 marks each. Please don't write me a whole slab of text about, for example, A and E. These are meant to be quick, and part of the discipline here is appropriate effort. If I've got a couple of marks to allocate, I'm really just looking for a couple of points. So please not a page of text in response to 1A. You'll do your heading and you'll do my heading. So what are council planners reports for? What is reported in the Geilston Bay example? So you need to open the planner's report and have a look. What information has been gathered in order for the planner to think about how it matches the scheme? What was the decision? What happened? What did the planner recommend? What did council decide? And then to give us a bit more context, and this is where I think this is better than the assessments that we've set in the past, is that today, before we all leave, we'll have a look at the Clarence City Council meetings so that you know where to find planners' reports, and so you can cite one. So I will stop talking soon, and we will get into breakout groups. You'll go into the Clarence City Council webpage and figure out how to find the section of the meeting that's where they're acting as the planning authority, and find some reports and see what they look like. So what else do I need to say before we do that? Yeah, there's a bit of background material. If you're really stretched for time, I would be guided by what's in the document that I've just showed you, and really concentrate on Geilston Bay and work through those prompts. So this material is left over from other years. It's highly relevant to the topic of what a council planner does, but it's not super directly helping you answer those questions. I know some of you have the time and inclination for this, so it's all here, but yeah, it's not going to be massively directly relevant. Same with the reading. I didn't give you anything like a formal reading, but this is left over from when a friend of mine from the Huron Valley came to talk to us and provided this material. And I think it's worth at least quickly skimming to be familiar with the kind of checklists that a council planner would use if they were, when they do this for real. All right, so we're going to go and have a look at the council planning agendas. So there's a bit of scrolling backwards and forwards. So I'm going to put you into groups of about 5 if I stop sharing. Oh, There's some chats. Oh, Tom, yes. Yeah, just answer them directly. That will help me if I'm not digging through slabs of text to find the answers 1A through 1E. I'll be reading through top to finish and be looking to bang, mark. So the more closely you can follow that, the better for me and hopefully for you as well, because it's super clear what you need to do. Ordinarily, we do make you write an actual planner's report, but given the planner's report is in some people's possession, that wasn't going to work. And so in rethinking that, we realised that we had an opportunity here to do the work of the planner's report, which is partly what the representations are about, but in a structured way. Hopefully this works. Okay, so to help you answer 1E, where you need to go and compare the council report against other reports, what you need to do is to go to the Clarence City Council webpage. Actually, let me put that link here so that you can click on that and get to that. At least somebody in each group have it open. And maybe don't everybody choose the most recent one. It's a bit boring in any case. I just opened it just before we started. You can see all the agendas and minutes there. What you want is the minutes, and yeah, choose anything. It might be interesting to see where the reports change much over the years. I suspect it hasn't, but that's something you can have a look at. So I'm going to throw you into groups.
Oh, turn that heater off. I'm going to take this
and
turn that heater off.
breakout rooms. Okay, 4 to 5 people per room if I make 3 rooms. I'm just going to assign you automatically. Any questions before I throw you out? 328. I'll pop into the rooms. I've got the time that you need for these tasks incredibly wrong. So I'm going to say 5 minutes, but I'll come and check on you in 5 minutes and see how you're going, just in case you need longer. Okay, so some of you got a bit stuck. Some of you made some good progress. So I just wanted to make sure as part of prompt 1E that you all know where to look. So this was the link to the agendas and minutes. Go in anywhere you like and click on one of the minutes, and that will open up in a new page. You'll see lots of things that aren't relevant. So scroll down until you see something that looks like planning. I was quite interested in this notice of motion about the Tasmanian Regional Land Use Strategy, but we are not getting distracted. So we go down to Planning Authority Matters. So we can see that there's 2 things that have come before this particular council meeting on pages 21 and 24 of this report, the minutes rather. So you can flick down to page 21. Here we go. So this is an example of a report that's gone to council that the councillors need to vote on. Some of the decisions are made by the senior planner, but where there's representations, they come before council. I think in the case of Clarence, the trigger is any representations at all come to council. I think Hobart is there's variation between councils as to whether the senior planner can make the decision or whether it has to be voted on by the alderman. As you know, in real life, there were 34 representations for Geilston Bay, which is heaps. That 34 individuals bothered to say something means that it's quite controversial. So, yeah, so this is, the ones in here are a lot more straightforward. The planner has gone through and done an analysis, has made a recommendation, and then the aldermen have a look, in some cases not much of a look, in some cases a thorough look, and then make a decision as to whether they accept the recommendation or not. So the idea of this was to force you to go to the City of Clarence page and realise where all these documents lay as part of understanding who all these people are. So we know who the proponent is, and we know that the proponent who's putting in the application to do some work often engages a planner, but now we're thinking about council. So council has planning experts who do the analysis. Council has elected members who used to be called aldermen and are now called councillors, and sometimes they act as the planning authority. So obviously this throws up a bit of a tricky situation where sometimes people have a political personal interest in a matter, but yet they're being asked to act as the planning authority. So you will see occasionally that an alderman excuses themselves from the vote. In this case, they were all there. But yeah, if there is a conflict of interest, it has to be declared. It's not always as clear cut as that. Anyway. So in 1E of your submission that is now due, Hannah, I've changed it to Sunday, the 2nd of May. Thank you for piping up. I'm really happy to change the deadline. I will not be looking at them over the weekend, so there's really no reason why they need to come in on Friday night instead of at the end of the weekend. You need to cite at least one example that you've looked at, and to be able to answer the question, is the Geilston Bay typical of a council planner's report? So would anybody, oh, sorry, it takes me a while to see the chat sometimes. No worries. Just need to make sure that that's consistent advice now. It's Sunday the 2nd of May, not the end of April. Did anybody get as far as looking at one of these examples and want to tell me what you saw? I will open. Okay, I've got, you should be able to now see the one for Geilston Bay. So even from the super quick look that we just had at those minutes, you can see that both those reports in the most recent council minutes, super short, like really absolutely bare bones in terms of what needed to be conveyed to the councillors to make a decision. Pretty straightforward. You know, here's the summary, here's the planning provisions, here's the requirements. You know, here's the recommendation. You can see, hopefully everybody's at least opened this document now, that at a very crude level, there's a major difference in that this is 37 pages long. And yeah, there's a lot of information in this report and a lot of analysis done by the council planning staff. And if you scroll a bit further down, an independent planner, to help the councils make a decision. So a much larger, much more complicated example than what you might typically find in an average day-to-day application. But look, I haven't gone through them other than opening up a couple. So there is no set answer to this. I want you to have a look and tell me what you think. So the only, as is pretty much a standard answer for a lot of this, like the only wrong answer is no answer at all. Please don't leave things blank. I can't give you any marks and it's lethal in terms of your overall grade. So if I haven't already said, one of the reasons we use Geilston Bay, apart from that it's really good on Aboriginal heritage, is that Bunfu, as part of her placement when she was doing the Master of Planning, did a lot of this report. She's the person who condensed the 34 representations down into a set of advice. She helped the professional planner do a lot of this report. So she's super familiar with it because she was part of it. And now that we've been using it for a while, we've got lots of resources that can support you in this example, including those of you who've got no prospect whatsoever of getting to the site. So yeah, just at a really crude level, you can say, like, it's got the typical structure, but this is a way more complicated, I'm guessing, from the crude look that I've had, than a typical report. Gosh, it's 1:45 already. What questions do you have about this first section of the assessment? Hopefully you won't find this part too difficult. I didn't overthink these questions. They're not trick questions. You do need the report open and you need to be looking for these answers, but hopefully with a bit of scrolling backwards and forwards, it should be reasonably straightforward. Again, don't leave this until the end of April or you'll be spending all of your time on it because there is a bit of workload associated with it. But if you can manage to knock this first part off this week or this weekend and clear the decks to move on to the representations and the context, everybody will be keeping their stress levels down. So while I'm here, just to make you aware, I'm just going to impersonating student view, that I've opened up everything that you need now to do this next assessment. And also for anybody doing KGG 507, I've opened up the first, well, that should only be the first week. Don't look at week 11 yet, it's probably a bit of a mess. The first week of the rezoning is ready for you. So if anybody in 507 is ready to keep going, there's plenty of material for you to look through in week 10. But given that most of you are in planning, all of you are in planning, this is now all open as of today and I've cleaned it up. Awesome, thank you for that feedback on quiz 2. Yeah, it wasn't easy and quite a few of you absolutely nailed it. Really, I was very impressed that you managed to do such a good job on 12 Lambert Avenue that I didn't give you any heads up on, and your representations were really professional. So yeah. It's 3:48. I do need to be over in chemistry at 4 o'clock, but we have some time up our sleeves in case anybody's confused or stressed about anything. That's what these sessions are for. Unfortunately, I have done a lot of talking. but now's the time to pipe up either in the chat or unmute. So Jack, go to week 7 and work through that. So the first document with the bulleted list is this one, upcoming assessment. Now that I've changed the date, I'll make sure that anywhere I'll post that, maybe I'll put in an announcement. I'll actually attach the document to the assessment task. Yeah, so if you open this now, it'll open as a new tab and it'll be the document that I created last week that says Friday the 30th of April, but I'll update that now and I'll make sure any subsequent postings say Sunday, not Friday. Yeah, so work through the web page. The lectures are good context, but you don't absolutely have to do them. Same with the reading, but yeah, so the prompts are here as well, just to encourage you to get on with week 7, because this is one assessment that would be better bitten off week by week rather than leaving it. Okay, I am going to stop the recording.